Chapter 2. A Man's Judgment. Strange, indeed, that Wareham should have been thus shot into the society of Anne Dalrymple. Never personally acquainted with her, he had heard more about her than of any other living woman. Could have described her positively, and believed he knew her mind. Heart, he denied her. Had he been in England during the past year or two, they must have met. But he had first been ordered abroad after a narrow escape of breakdown from overwork. Then, bitten by the charm of the South, let himself drift lazily from Italy to Greece, from Greece to Egypt, from Egypt to India, all lands of enchantment. During the latter part of this stay, letters had been showered upon him from his chief friend, Hugh Forbes. Letters crammed with enthusiasm, with hope, with despair, a thundering chord, with the beautiful Miss Dalrymple for its root. Wareham pished and pooed, and sometimes pitched away as much as half a letter unread with a word. But he was a man with an unsuspected strength of sympathy. Probably it belonged to his success as an author that, once interested, he could project himself into another mind and feel its sensations. Especially where his affections were concerned, was this the case? And it may have been fortunate for him that his affections were not easily moved, perhaps because he feared what he counted a weakness and was reluctant to let himself go. Once he had loved a woman, but this happened before he was famous, and she married a richer man. Since that time, his heart had apparently remained untouched. Although he never avoided women's society, the dark time of disappointment drew him nearer to his friend. Hugh was 3 years his junior, but they had been at school together, and the habit of befriending the younger boy had stuck to Dick. When this happens, the strength of the tie is scarcely calculable, at least on the side of the elder. Hugh knew and acted upon it almost unconsciously. He would as soon have expected the funds to collapse as Dick to fail him in case of need. After a time, his letters announced the unexpected to Wareham. The affair was serious, and Miss Dalrymple had accepted him. Rapture filled sheets of paper. Then letters ceased, and Wareham, who was in India, smiled, recognizing the inevitable, and waited, without misgiving, until a cooler time should bring back the outer manifestations of a friendship which he could not doubt. They came in the form of a cry of misery. within 6 weeks of the wedding, Miss Dalrymple had broken off the engagement. He read the letter in amazement and rushed back to England, snapping the small ties with which he was lazily suffering himself to be entangled, and knowing that in the blackness of a lover's despair, his was the only hand to bring the touch of comfort. Under his own misfortunes, he had been dumb, but this reticence did not affect his sympathy with a more expansive nature. Hugh liked to enlarge upon his sorrows. Unfailing interest lurked for him in the question how they might have been avoided, and the answer was never so convincing as to suffice. Wareham gave a patient ear to the lengthy catalogue of Miss Dalrymple's charms, until he could have repeated them without prompting, and offered one suggestion after another as to the causes which had induced her to break off her engagement, for there had been no quarrel, no explanation. Hugh had merely received a letter saying that she had discovered it to have been a mistake and could not marry him. She accepted the whole blame and asked him not to attempt to see her. It was a preposterous request, and he battled against it with all his might, only to find that the fates were on her side. For although he wrote stormy, heartbreaking letters, although he battered at her doors, his letters remained unanswered. And all that he could hear was that Miss Dalrymple was ill and would see no one. This made him worse. Her father was dead. Brothers she had none. Lady Dalrymple, her stepmother, an inconsequent, careless woman of the world, who had shrugged her shoulders when Anne announced her intention of marrying Hugh Forbes, admitted him to her boudoir and told him with another shrug that she could neither interfere nor offer an explanation. Anne had acted throughout on her own responsibility, as she had not opposed when she disapproved. He could not expect her to take part against her judgment. How was I to fight such an argument? Hugh asked Wareham, not once, but 20 times. The first time he was answered by a question whether he had never met the girl anywhere. Was I going to insult her in public? Groaned Hugh. And his friend liked him the better for manly self-restraint when he had reason for being distraught. He had avoided society and nursed his misery, exaggerating it perhaps, but acting gallantly. Wareham could not but reach the conclusion that he had been a abominably treated, yet where lay the remedy? Patience had to be offered in draughts and was turned from with loathing. This went on until even Wareham grew weary of repetition and was not sorry when Hugh's sister came up to town and appeared eager for confidences, with the belief that his friend would be the better for a change of consolers. Wareham resolved to carry out a vague plan and go to Norway for 3 or 4 weeks. And there, as has been seen, he at once found himself confronted with Miss Dalrymple. Naturally, she now occupied his thoughts. He had sent a telegram to Hugh on arrival, in compliance with a promise he had made to let him know if he at any time became acquainted with Miss Dalrymple's movements, a promise made idly and already regretted. Tonight, he pieced together his impressions. They were as unfavourable as might have been expected. The signs in her face he had already read against her, and her composure almost shocked him. He was certain, from the exuberance of Hugh's friendship, that his own name must be familiar to Miss Dalrymple, and considering her tacit acknowledgment to Hugh that she had treated him very ill, a woman whose heart was what a woman's should be, must have felt and betrayed uneasiness at finding herself face to face with the dearest friend of the man she had jilted. Miss Dalrymple, however, had shown no symptom of feeling. She had treated him as if he had never so much as touched her thoughts. And to do Wareham justice, it was friendship, not vanity, which resented the indifference. He thought it horrible that a woman should be so cold. Pride also, he read accusingly. In his own mind, he believed Hugh to have been flung over because she had grown discontented with his position. That she had yielded primarily, Wareham interpreted as due to the young fellow's strong personal charm, perhaps to weariness of other men. It was an impulse, not love, and it was not powerful enough for a strain. He depreciated her beauty. Who cares for half-shut eyes? He was not sure that Millie Ravenhill was not prettier. At any rate, he was certain that she was more attractive. When conclusions stand up before us in such mighty good order, the chances are that we have always kept them ready-made. This did not strike Wareham, sifter of causes though he might be. He set them down to acuteness of observation and credited them with impartiality. It vexed him the more to be thrust by circumstances into a sort of companionship with Miss Dalrymple, whom of all women he would have avoided. He would take the first opportunity to break away. But when? For in Western Norway, where there is but one short railway, it often happens that you must leave when you can, not when you will. And at Stavanger, this means once in the 24 hours. Imagine the sensation. 19th century Englishman. What annoyance! What repose! Whether he would or no, he must make up his mind to journey as far as Sand, perhaps Ossen, perhaps even Nice, with all the others who had landed from the El Dorado. After, he might go on by himself, and this consolation sent him off to bed. When he met the Ravenhills in the morning, he found that Mrs. Ravenhill's inexhaustible energy had carried her out sketching and brought her back hungry. She vowed that the place was charming, and after they had breakfasted, waited upon by a girl in Hardanger dress, cut-away scarlet bodice, beaded stomacher and belt, with white chemisette, sleeves and apron, and fair hair hanging in a long plait, insisted upon bearing them off to prove her words. And, indeed, though there is nothing striking in the town itself, it was impossible not to feel its bright pleasantness. The sun shone gaily. The sweet, pure air made every breath delight. Even in July, there was a fragrant freshness abroad, such as only comes to lands where spring and summer flutter down as fleeting visitors, and we cannot do enough to welcome them. All the houses are painted, whitened, and decked with flowers. They have not the lazy, sunburnt, picturesque charm of the south, but under the delicate northern sky, there is a quiet yet vigorous cheerfulness about them. Wareham, who had seen eastern splendours, was conscious of this gentle quality and liked it. They wandered round the busy harbour, into the cathedral with its Norman pillars and great, impressive, barbaric pulpit. The minister came out as they went in, a long black figure with a tall hat, a Puritan ruff, and a kind face, who looked as if he had stepped out of a storybook. Afterwards they strolled on, not much caring where, between hedges of sweetbriar, past boggy places waving with cotton rush, and climbed a hill to see the interlacing fjords and the distant mountains veiled with advancing mist, and the women making their hay in the fields. Milly, who had not cared very much for Norway before she came, having something of a girl's indifference to the unknown, was discovering delightful things around and before her. Were they not rather blossoming in her heart? As for Wareham, He, too, became sanguine. So far, the martins were avoided, and with good luck, the annoyance of their presence might be reduced to a minimum. 3 people content. What good sprite was here, and what mischief lurked behind. The 3, equally unconscious of their luck and their danger, looked at all they could see, went back to the inn for more salmon, and steamed away down the fjords towards Sand. An hour afterwards, they were on the upper deck of the little steamer. Grey mists had gathered in their scouts and swept up, chilling the air and battling with the sunshine. Now one, now the other, gained the day. Miss Dalrymple walked about with Colonel Martin. Wareham believed she shared his own disinclination to meet, and, under the circumstances, disinclination was more creditable than indifference. His hard thoughts of her softened slightly, very slightly. Mutual avoidance would prevent difficulties which might otherwise prove awkward in the coming days. Meanwhile, as yet nothing had been said or done which foreboded trouble. It pleased Milly to treat Wareham as if he were responsible for anything lacking in the beauty of the country. And as the wide entrance to the Sand fjord is uninteresting, and a cold wind nipping in from a bleak sea chilled the landscape, he became the butt of many mock reproaches. Wrapped in a fur cloak and barricaded behind an umbrella, she vowed there was nothing to see. Perhaps there was not much, but Wareham found a never-failing attraction in the small, scattered villages at which the steamer stopped. A dozen or more white houses, a little stone pier, against which, under the crystal-clear water, seaweed of a wonderful green clung and floated, and a stir of human interest among the people who came down to the water's edge to meet the steamer. At one of these landing places, the crowd was more than usual. A pink, green, and blue crowd, and there was concentrating of eyes upon one young girl to whom the vessel had brought a bouquet. A white bridal bouquet. The pride with which she received it, the eagerness with which she read the note accompanying it, and allowed the children to admire and smell it, the interest of the other gazing girls, and the dignified air she assumed after the first few moments, made up an idyll which Wareham watched, smiling. He was sorry when the steamer backed away from the busy pier and left the girl with her hopes, her triumphs, and her awe-smitten companions. Going back to tell the idle Milly that she had missed something, his eye fell upon a tall, slight figure in a long cloak, Standing near the spot where he had stood, and talking to a shorter man with a grey beard, it was Miss Dalrymple. And she had apparently been occupied in the same way as himself. Her face was turned towards him, but she made no sign of recognition. "Well?" demanded Milly, gaily. "Well, you would have found it interesting. How do you know? Listen to what were the accessories. A note and a nosegay." "Go on. No more?" "A young woman. Beyond question, a wedding near at hand. And I have remarked that all women are interested in weddings. Distantly viewed, they are tolerable, but looked at closely, one's pity becomes painful. And I am too old to cry comfortably." "You must be supersensitive." "I saw no promise of tears." "The actors conceal their feelings. Only the spectators may suffer theirs to be seen. Look how grave Miss Dalrymple is." Wareham glanced. Anne stood where he had last noticed her, apparently listening to her companion, and it was true that she appeared to be grave and preoccupied. Hers was a face in which beauty played capriciously, and at this moment the lines justified his charge of hardness. "Merely bored, I should say, and not troubling herself to hide it." Milly put a sudden question. "Wasn't there some story, some engagement, in which Miss Dalrymple was mixed up? I'm sure there was something one ought to remember." Wareham did not feel himself called upon to assist in this mental examination. "With her beauty, she is likely enough to be talked over," was all he said. But Milly persisted. "I'm certain there was a sort of sensation. I must ask Mother, for I am suddenly seized with curiosity. What was it? Wasn't there—" She broke off, and in a moment looked up triumphantly. "Of course! How stupid of me! Now it comes back. She was engaged to a son of Sir Michael Forbes. Didn't you hear of it? Oh, I'm sure you did. The wedding day was actually fixed and everything arranged, and the next thing one heard was that it was at an end. How could I have forgotten?" Wareham was silent. She looked at him in surprise. "It is impossible it should not have come to your ears?" His face changed a little. If she had known it, she was irritating him by her persistence. Although he acquitted her of intention, one may as well leave the idle talk of the season behind one, he said gravely. "One can't, with the chief subject before one," retorted Milly. "Confess! Haven't you thought about it since you saw her?" He hesitated. Then, allowing the fact, adding that thoughts might remain one's own. "Ah, you think me a chatterbox," she said good-humouredly. "How tiresome! Here is another shower sweeping across. Shall I get a cloak?" "No, I really want to hear more. I am sure you can tell me," she added with eagerness, "which was to blame." What a question! Why? Is it strange? Somebody was, I suppose. I have very little doubt myself that Mr. Forbes was the sinner. Wareham was startled from his impassive attitude. "What has given you that impression?" "What?" "How can I tell you? If I were to say it was a woman's intuition, you would laugh. So that I imagine it is owing to vague recollection of what I may have heard. If that is all, I think you should disabuse yourself of the idea. Whoever was to blame, it was certainly not Mr. Forbes." She looked at him mischievously, and remarked that he spoke so gravely of an indifferent matter that one might suppose he had an interest in it. "I have not said that it was indifferent." "Oh." Milly coloured, and said hastily, "I beg your pardon. I am very sorry. If I had dreamed that there was anything to make you care, I should not have tried to find out your opinion. Do you know, I should be really glad of a mackintosh." Wareham went to get it. But when he came back, he reverted to the subject. "Let me explain why I care. The man to whom Miss Dalrymple was engaged is my friend. And knowing as I do the circumstances of the case, I can't stand hearing him reproached. I can't explain the facts, simply because they are inexplicable, but I will ask you to take my word that no blame rests with him." "Oh, no, I understand. I quite understand," Milly stammered, wishing herself anywhere else. She was frightened, and could not find a jest with which to swing herself out of the difficulty. Her embarrassment made him think more kindly of her again. Presently, Mrs. Ravenhill, who had been talking to Mrs. Martin, came to carry Milly to a more sheltered corner. Wareham, seeing that they were approaching another fjord village, went to the vessel's side. This time there was a contrast. No crowd, no happy throng of girls. A few children, a few older people gathered on the pier. The baker came to receive his sack of flour, the postmaster his letters. Next, out of the steamer, another burden was lifted, an empty black coffin, studded with silver nails. The children, and the children only, stared curiously at the label. Then they too ran off. And so long as the steamer was in sight, there lay the strange, black, deserted thing, a blot on the green, unclaimed, and to all appearance uncared for. Some prick of the universal humanity kept Wareham's eyes fixed upon it. He felt as if the dead man, whose home it was to be, was wronged by this callous desertation, as if he had been bound to all of them by a tie they were ignoring. And while conscious of the unreasonableness of his blame, he could not shake off the feeling that he shared in the common cruelty. Suddenly, by his side, a voice exclaimed, "It is horrible!" He turned abruptly and saw Miss Dalrymple. Her eyes were fixed where he had been looking. And she went on, "One has no right to resent a mere accident. They may have to come from a distance, and it can't be known exactly when the steamer will call. Still, it offends one," said Wareham. "It is heartless." He kept his eyes on her face. "Happily, the dead are not hurt by heartlessness." "Happily," she returned, after a moment's pause. She glanced at him, half closing her eyes in the manner he disliked. Already the conversation had taken an edge, of which, even had it been unintentional, neither could have been unconscious. But Wareham wished to wound. He asked whether she had noticed the group at the landing place before this last. She made a sign of assent. "What did you think of it?" "I? Was it more creditable to human nature? Was heart there? Or was the girl merely pleased with her power?" A smile made him more angry. "What makes you or me her judge?" "Dismal experience as to motives," Wareham replied. "One lives and learns." "Not so surely," Anne returned coolly. "Half the time our pretense of reading motives is sheer affectation. What we are really after is the making our conclusions fit our theories." She suddenly shot away from the subject. "Are you travelling with the Ravenhills?" "Yes. No," said Wareham, surprised. "It was a chance meeting, and we have all to go the same way." "All?" She frowned. "Do you mean that we are irrevocably bound together?" "Practically. Naturally, there may be small deviations." "Oh." "Hateful," she said frankly, and apparently mused over the information. Having bestowed it, Wareham was silent. until she put another question. "May I inquire where you are all going tonight? I can only help you so far as the Raven Hills are concerned. They will push on to Osen. And you?" "Oh, of course." "You were mistaken then," said Anne triumphantly, "in supposing that we follow the same route. We stop at Sand." He laughed. "Pardon me, Sand and Osen are practically the same thing. We meet on the same steamer tomorrow morning." "Oh," she reflected again. "There is no help for it, then. Except—" Wareham waited. "I trust to you not to take advantage," she said, in a hurried tone, and with a movement of the head which he interpreted as his dismissal. Instead of rejoining the Raven Hills, he stood solitary and thought over the conversation. What ground had been won or lost between two antagonists? He had made it plain to Miss Dalrymple that he was on his friend's side, and she had let him know that the meeting was disagreeable to her. So far, there was equality. But though he had not disguised his feelings, he could not flatter himself that he had caused Anne the slightest embarrassment, and there was vexation in the thought that their first movement had been towards sympathy, so that he remembered a throb of satisfaction on hearing her exclamation by his side. He remembered too, and dwelt upon, the expression of her look, which said more than words. The brow slightly contracted, the eyes fixed, the strong, pitiful curve of her lips. In spite of his prejudice, she was beautiful. Hugh's raptures had inspired him with contradictory views, but he told himself now that there was no reason to be unfair, and that a lover might very well lose his head over fewer charms. Disapproval, contempt perhaps, were as strong as ever, and proof against a woman's face. Yet something in his own thoughts irritated him, and he turned from them to talk to a tall German whose wife and children were ensconced in the warmest corner of the deck.